Welcome to From Our Generation, where we uncover the ideas and events that shape the world we live in today. I'm Crom Carmichael.
And I'm Mike Hassel.
Together we'll explore the past to better understand the present, because history isn't just about what happened, it's about how you think about it. Well, Michael, it is October 10th, 2025. It has only been a week since you and I were last together on our podcast, and so much has happened in a week. Other things haven't happened that we thought might happen. And so I thought
it seems to keep getting more intense. You know, we've said this several times. It's been such an extraordinary week. And here, this last week, we've had the government shutdown, I guess, is now entering its, 8th or 9th day? Didn't it shut down on a Wednesday?
It shut down on midnight Tuesday night, midnight Wednesday morning, yeah.
So that's been about 10 days.
Yep,
and then we had this announcement of a ceasefire in the Mideast yesterday.
A treaty, not a ceasefire.
Okay.
Let's be very clear on that. This is different than a ceasefire.
Treaty.
Peace treaty.
It includes a ceasefire as part of its terms.
Yes.
Yes, it was an agreement.
Yeah, and that agreement has apparently 20 parts, and they're sequential. But here's some of the things that they include. One is a complete release of all of the hostages and return of any of the people who died in captivity. And I think that's a total of 48. Mm-hmm. 20 alive, 28 who were killed or who died in captivity.
Yes.
They did not die of natural causes. They died because they were in captivity. And then you had some Palestinians and some Hamas prisoners that are part of that exchange. But that is supposed to happen Monday. And the Hamas has said that not all of the remains of those who died in captivity will be returned on Monday, because in many cases they have to go find them and dig them up. They were put in unmarked graves. They're just bodies put in the ground. But in addition to that, Hamas has to de-arm. Hamas has to agree that it will not participate in the politics of Gaza or in the West.
You mean disarm? Is that
what did I say?
De-arm.
De-arm?
Yeah.
You are correct. You are correct. De-armed would look bad. That'd be it's tough to pick anything
up.
Let's
not go there.
That's right. So disarm. They'd have to disarm. They also have to agree not to participate in politics, either in Gaza or in the West Bank. So essentially, they have to. Hamas as an organization will cease to exist. Now, that doesn't mean that some of the Hamas fighters might not try to do other things, but Gaza is going to and Israel.
They've agreed to this, Hamas.
Yes.
Okay.
They have agreed to this, and that's because the way Marco Rubio was sitting next to Trump talking about the very intense conversations on the phone that went on for hours. Not each call, but a whole series of calls. And Marco Rubio said there was a great deal. He kind of smiled and he said the calls were very intense and the pressure was significant. And that included great pressure put on Bibi Netanyahu to sign the document as it was and not try to continue to negotiate. And Netanyahu yielded and signed the document. So Israel has signed it. Hamas has signed it. And the way it lays out to me is that Trump threatened Bibi Netanyahu with, you'll lose all of our support if you don't sign it. And then he told Hamas, if you don't sign it, I'm going to turn Bibi Netanyahu loose and kill every one of you. And I'll wash my hands of it. And the fact that Trump does keep his words when he makes a threat, it's not really a threat; it's a promise.
Well, it's a credible threat. Yeah.
It's a thank. That's better. It's a credible threat, and so people believe him. As opposed to when Biden was asked about things like this, his response was "Don't," and then people did it, and nothing happened.
Yeah,
and he was seen as a paper tiger, and so it really is an interesting question. Michael, to me, and I'm 77 years old, and Trump is a president like none other in my lifetime.
Yeah,
and so I can study other presidents. I can study Abraham Lincoln. I can study George Washington, but I didn't see it. contrary to what some people think.
I think you've told a story earlier on this podcast of Trump, I think, talking to the Taliban and showed them a picture of where they live.
Yeah, of where they were, right, not just where they lived, where they were at that moment.
Okay.
And he said, if you harm a single American between now and the time that we leave, he said, we're going to negotiate leaving Afghanistan. But if during that negotiation, if one American is harmed, and then he showed him the picture, he said, you see the three of you? This is a live picture. I can find you wherever you are, and I'll kill you. So from that moment until Trump left office, not a single American was harmed in Afghanistan.
Yeah.
And that's because they believed him, and they believed two things. They believed he would execute on the threat if they violated their promise, but they also believed that he was serious about negotiating an exit.
Yeah.
And you have to believe both at the same time in order for there to be progress. And that's what's so interesting to me as I watch how Trump acts. Trump will threaten people. I mean, and I don't mean in some cases he threatens them with their life, if it's that type of thing. But the other is like what he did with India and Pakistan. He said, what you all are doing is stupid and it's dangerous. And a lot of Pakistanis, a lot of Indians could be killed if it escalates. So if you don't stop right now, I'm going to impose 100% tariffs on both of your countries. And I've never thought of tariffs as a diplomatic weapon. And here I am, having watched presidents for, 50 years. I've never thought of tariffs being used as a diplomatic weapon, and they are effective because money is effective. And so I regularly am astounded, and I know a lot of people who just
nearly speechless. Nearly speechless.
Nearly speechless. Yeah. But Mike, you sent me a week ago. Actually, you sent me an article written by Andrew Sullivan, who I think is a lot of things that he writes I don't agree with, but his ability to write well is just reading his articles. Even if you disagree with them, they're so well written. They're not well reasoned all the time, but they are well written.
Yeah, you don't agree with what he's saying often, but he is an excellent writer.
Yes, and so the one you sent me two. One was about Keir Starmer, the Prime Minister of Great Britain, and the other was an article that he wrote about Trump. And the one about Starmer was showing his polling numbers and the polling numbers of his major adversary. So in Britain, they have a parliamentary system, and the two major political parties, Starmer is the Prime Minister, and his party is the Labour Party. The other major party is the Tory Party, and the Tory Party had power for a very long time, and they just became the public in Great Britain lost confidence that the Tory Party could do anything correctly. Under the Tory Party, immigration soared, the deficits soared, the standard of living stagnated and began to fall, and so the people just got tired of the Tories, and they voted for the Labour Party more against the Tories than for Labour. But Starmer, when he ran, he said, immigration is a problem and I will fix it. Okay? And so then he won, and he still says immigration is a problem, but he has done nothing to fix it. And so in 1 year, their party has gone from about a 45% approval rating to under 20%.
So Andrew Sullivan was very critical of Keir Starmer in this article.
Yeah.
And intensely so. I mean, I'm struggling for the right word here. He was so sharp in his insights about what's going on, what's wrong with it. And I loved reading it because I agree with him on that. I think, Keir Starmer, basically the Labour Party is the left there and the Tory Party is the right.
Well, except the Tory Party is not the right. There is no right party except the Reform Party, which now it's a new party, which now has a 30% approval rating, which is equal to a combination of the two major parties. Please go ahead.
Well, historically, the Tory party would be what we'd call the right. That's what Margaret Thatcher was, I believe.
But we're back 35 years.
Yes. And so what you're saying is that they ceased to defend a lot of the principles of the right, and they're being challenged then from an even further right party. And you might say that the Tories there are not very conservative at all. And so the conservative forces are coming further from the right.
Right.
But anyway, Andrew Sullivan was very critical of the left there. And then you read an article that he writes about Trump, and it's equally critical of him.
But for the opposite reason. What's so interesting is, here's what he said about Keir Starmer. He said Keir Starmer, when he campaigned, he said that immigration was a problem and he would deport many many immigrants who were there.
And he hasn't done it.
He hasn't acted on it. He's only talked about it, okay? And he hasn't done it. And consequently, and it's only been a year, but but Starmer's polling is now down around 18%. The Tory party is at 15%. The Reform Party, which is advocating mass deportation, is at 30%. Okay? Now, and he is mad at Starmer for not keeping his word, for only talking the game but not walking the walk.
Sullivan is angry.
I'm sorry. Yeah. Sullivan is angry. Well, then he writes an article about Trump, and the article about Trump is essentially saying what's the problem with Trump is he keeps his promises, and his promises are bad, and it just is, it's so interesting to see that.
And does this mean he thinks that these deportations are inhumane, or what?
Yes, but for Trump, it's not just immigration. There's so many other issues for Andrew Sullivan about Trump that bother him. But the key thing that he even acknowledges is that Trump made these promises when he ran, and he is actually keeping his promises. And the fact that Andrew Sullivan disagrees with the promises makes him mad at Trump for the opposite reason of why he was mad at Starmer, which I find fascinating. There was another article written by Byron York, and the title of it, and it goes into what we're talking about here. The title of it is Trump's Remarkable Polling Stability. And what Byron York points out is that Trump's popularity stays between 41 and 46%. It will occasionally bounce up to 50. It doesn't drop below 41. It will occasionally bounce up to 50, but it stays in this very narrow range. Obama's range was over 20 points. Biden's range was over 20 points. Bush's range was over 60 points. George H.W., because right after 9/11, and he attacked Afghanistan, the Taliban, his approval rating was at 90%. Well, that's obviously unsustainable. But when he left office, Bush's approval rating was under 30%.
So you have a lot of these figures that have support that swings, and it just exhibits that a lot of that support is thin
but not Trump's.
Weak. But not Trump. This is my point.
Yeah.
A lot of these figures, Trump's is solid at 41. Mm-hmm. There's about 40.
At least 41.
Okay, well, you said 41 earlier. Whatever
41,
the number
is the floor.
Yeah. It's solid at 41, and then the others come and go.
Yeah. Sorry.
This is my point, is that is pretty rock solid. They just never leave him.
Yeah.
Even if he makes mistakes, I think those people are not going to leave him because they see that he has at least tried to keep his promises, and in most cases he has kept his promises.
Yes, and it's and this is something that when you go back to Newt Gingrich, and this was Newt Gingrich ran on for those who are too young to remember. That he ran in 1994 on the contract with America, and there were 10 promises that the Republicans all signed who were running in 1994. Every Republican running for a House seat signed the contract with America, and the contract promised that they would bring to the floor for a vote these following 10 things, and Gingrich kept every one of those promises. Only 7 passed, 3 did not. but they promised to bring them to the floor for a vote. And the result of that, kind of interesting. You had a very long government standoff where the government did shut down for, I think, the longest period maybe ever, but it was a very long time. And that standoff between Gingrich and Clinton resulted in eventually Clinton signed a reduction in the capital gains tax and significant welfare reform, which led to a balanced budget for 4 years.
So that stability of support made a big difference in public policy.
Yes, and in Trump's case, what aggravates the left so much is that no matter what they say, no matter what Trump does, his supporters stay with him. Well, that's not exactly accurate. It would be more accurate to say because Trump tries very hard to keep his promises, his supporters stay with him. That's really the real reason they stay with him. Whether they like him. They like his policies, let's put it that way. And the left can't figure out how to dent that. And the midterms is going to be interesting because typically the midterms, especially of the second term of a president, the midterms, the president is losing a lot of power, a lot of influence, and the voters are kind of tired. Yes. But in my view of history, the voters are tired after 6 years of somebody because they have not tried very hard to keep their promises, and in some cases they've actually broken their word.
Yeah, and I think in almost every case in American history, except for one other, Grover Cleveland, the 2 terms were consecutive.
Yes.
So in a midterms of a second term, it's always after 6 years, except for Cleveland and Trump. It's after 6 years of fatigue now, policies getting tired. That's not the case with Trump. He was out of office, and we get to see the alternative for 4 years, right? And so what's interesting to me is Trump's never going to be in another election, okay? He teases that he's going to run again for a third term.
He has his Trump 28 hats, which is absolutely hysterical.
Well, it's trolling.
It is.
You know, he would lose, I think, almost all of that 40% if he were to say, I'm going to. And if Roosevelt, by the way, did this. He actually did it. He tried to run a third time for president.
Roosevelt?
Franklin Roosevelt.
He ran four times. He won 4 times. They passed the amendment after Roosevelt because nobody wanted a president to do that again. So Roosevelt won in 32, 36, 40, and 44.
Wow.
Yeah,
I didn't realize that.
Yeah,
I knew that he broke the mold, but
you're just a youngster.
Well,
so I know these things.
Yes, I know. so I'm happy to be better educated about that. But I know that Trump can't do it. He would lose most of that stable support if he tried to do it. I would be among those. I know that's.
But he can't. There's a constitutional amendment.
Yeah. Well, he'd have to try to change the Constitution. He wouldn't probably have the support to do that.
Right. No.
So it's really trolling. Is what it is. But my point is he's not going to run again. The question is, are there coattails for the midterms, as you were starting to allude to a moment ago? And then at the end of his second term, what is his legacy going to be? Is someone going to be able to pick up, like George Bush picked up on the Reagan legacy? He was elected to continue the Reagan legacy and pretty quickly screwed it up by making a promise he didn't keep.
Right.
Back to our theme for today.
Right. So what we have here, as we sit here right now, you've got the government shutdown. You have Schumer, who actually came out on the Senate floor and said that the shutdown is helping the Democrat Party. I think that was a statement that he wished he could take back. But then you also have other things going on in the Democrat Party that are fascinating to watch. You have this fellow, Jay Jones, who is running for the position of Attorney General in the state of Virginia, who texts have now been revealed that Jay Jones called for. He said, I have 3 bullets, and there's Hitler, there's Stalin, I think it was Hitler, Stalin, and Pol Pot, and Gilbert. And Gilbert was the Republican Speaker of the House in Virginia, and he said, I would put 2 bullets in the head of Gilbert. And he sent that text to I think it was a Republican, and the Republican said, this is not a time to be funny. And he essentially texted back, I'm not being funny, I'm being serious. And then he followed up by saying, and I hope that Gilbert's wife has her children die in her arms. The children were 2 years old and 4 years old. Not a single elected Democrat will call for Jay Jones to pull out of the race. Now that is fascinating to me. That's what a tie. The Democrats, and I have said that the government employee unions control the Democrat Party, and the government employee unions only care about one thing, and that is more power and bigger government. Well, two things: more power and bigger government, because that helps the government employee union's business model. But Abigail Spanberger, who's running for governor, wouldn't address it in the debate, either last night or the night before. She said that's up to the voters to decide. So she will not make a comment on whether or not somebody who has called for literally the assassination of the Speaker of the House.
Now, she's in a bad spot. There's really not much that she could say.
Well, sure she could. Sure she could. And any Republican would have to, because what's interesting is a Republican who refused to call for the removal of, not running or removal of office of somebody who did something that bad, that Republicans would lose support among Republicans. You remember that guy from New York who claimed he worked for Goldman Sachs and he didn't? I don't remember. He was a congressman.
Oh, a Republican congressman.
And he won.
Yeah.
And there were like 3 or 4 big lies that he told, and the Republican Party threw him out of Congress.
Yeah.
They said, "We're not going to have you're not going to taint our party with your all the lies that you told." So they threw him out of. They took a vote and threw him out of Congress, and he had not been convicted. He has later, since then, been convicted
and is in jail now.
In jail now.
Yeah.
So at any rate, I find that to be interesting, and we'll see. I can't imagine that he'll win the race, but it'll be interesting to see what percentage of people in Virginia still vote for him, knowing this. Katie Porter is the leading candidate for governor of California. And there are now all these clips coming out showing her being incredibly abusive of her own staff. I mean, just saying all kinds of nasty things to them and just treating them like they're dogs, and kicking them around like they're bad dogs. I mean, and she is an angry. Apparently, she was married once, and I think she did something pretty despicable to her former husband when they were married. But she is a mean, angry person, and she's the leading candidate for the governorship of California. So it'll be interesting to see where that goes.
So here's my question for
Sure,
you:
yeah.
If you are a moderate Democrat, a patriotic person who believes in the country, wants it to prosper, wants it to culturally to succeed, to be healed rather than to be further ripped. Mm-hmm. What do you do when you have such a strong element of your party? Then the media likes to present that both sides have their extremes, and of course they do. I happen to think the extremes on the right are very small and highly marginalized. They don't have a big. They're not in this 40% that I think of as Trump's.
Well, they may be, but they don't control it. They have no power, as you said. They may exist.
They're not a significant part. They may categorize into that. They're just not the force behind that 40%. Maybe is a better way to put it. On the left, you've got a progressive wing that's going to challenge people in the center on their own side. You had even the head of the DNC that was going to raise money to challenge the old guys. Remember that?
Right. That was the young guy, David Hogg.
Yeah, and they did throw him out.
They did throw him out
because he was a threat to their stability.
Well,
but you have this basically war within the left on whether the answer is to moderate and to conciliate and to try to work across the aisle and get things done, or do you move harder left and continue to insist that bigger government, more spending, more radicalization, less police, all of the ideology that goes along with that is their answer to
Now you asked me if I were.
If you were
a moderate, am I an office holder?
Take whatever example you want to take. You just
it
take
would
the
have
one
to
you
be
like.
an office holder.
Yeah.
Because if I'm a moderate Democrat and all I am is a voter, then I can continue to vote however I want to, and I'm one vote. But if I'm an office holder, and I want to be moderate. The question is, can I be? And the best example I can come up with is that the Democrat, there's a Democrat in the House from the state of Maine. He is the only Democrat in the House that voted in favor of the continuing resolution. A couple of days after he voted in favor of the continuing resolution to keep the government open, another statewide Democrat announced that he was going to run in the primaries, and the government employee unions have come out and said they're going to support the challenger. Mm-hmm. And so if this Democrat, who's a current office holder, who's trying to be moderate and keep the government open, if he loses in the primary, then that will prove to office holders you cannot cross the government employee unions. Now, there is an example. I'm now going to argue with myself, but I'm trying to figure out whether or not John Fetterman is the cleverest politician on the planet, or whether he is a truly independent thinker, because he has voted to keep the government open. He has supported Israel. He has done many things that the left cannot stand. And the the government employee unions, when he came out in favor of the CR, government employee unions.
Continuing resolution,
yes,
which was on Republican terms. It was clean with nothing but some security since the Charlie Kirk thing. They've added some money to keep them safe. But other than that, it was clean.
Keep everybody safe.
Yeah,
all office holders.
Everybody.
Yeah.
But it was clean with no partisan stuff. Just get us further down the road and we'll work out these other things
7
separately.
weeks.
Yeah.
7 weeks.
Yeah. And he voted with the Republicans.
He voted with the Republicans, and the government employee unions came out and attacked him Now, here's the problem that the left has with Fetterman, the hardcore left with Fetterman. If they primary him, and he's not up this time, so he's up in 28. But if they were to primary him and he switched parties, we talked about this last week, Fetterman's popularity with the Republican Party in Pennsylvania is actually higher than his popularity is with the Democrat Party. And with independents, it's almost as high as, it's higher than the Republicans. So Fetterman,
he's like the current version of Joe Manchin. What Joe Manchin was in West Virginia 5 years ago, he is now in Pennsylvania.
Yeah, and so what Fetterman can do to the Democrats is say, if you primary me, I'll switch parties, and I will win as a Republican. And so now they're stuck. They can't primary him, and he'll win re-election in 28 because the Republicans. I mean, there's no good reason to try to run against somebody who is a person who is seeking common ground, which is your question.
Yeah, and so if you're in this position as an office holder, you really can't repudiate the progressive left, the hard left. And my question is, how does it ever get their influence get diminished? Because in my opinion, they're creating a lot of turmoil, a lot of damage, and a lot of the energy and money in the Democratic Party is coming from those factions.
Well, there are a lot of billionaires who support the Democrat Party. They give tens of millions, maybe even hundreds of millions of dollars in the aggregate to the Democrat Party, which is serious money. But the government employee unions collect over $7 billion a year. A year. That is $28 billion in every presidential cycle. The amount of money that government employee unions are able to spend to support any Democrat that they choose, and they don't choose two in a Democrat primary. They choose one. And that person almost always wins the election to represent the Democrat Party. So to answer your question, I believe that government employee unions are the true cancer in our body politic. Now, they came into existence in 1961 when John Kennedy signed an executive order allowing government employees to unionize. FDR, Franklin Roosevelt, opposed allowing government employees to unionize. Even Meany, the head of the AFL-CIO, said that
George Meany.
He said government employees, if they unionized, they would be negotiating against the taxpayers, and that would not be good for the country. But Kennedy signed it into executive order.
Another way of putting that, by the way, is that the government would be negotiating with the government employees. They're on the same side of the table, and the taxpayers are the ones that get left out.
Better said.
Yeah.
Better said. Thank you. And so Kennedy signs the executive order in 1961, and then when Democrats controlled the House and the Senate and had Johnson as president, they passed it as a statute. Now, here's what I don't know. I do not know if a state like Tennessee, which is controlled by Republicans in both houses of the legislature and the governor, I don't know if the legislature in Tennessee could outlaw government employee unions among state and local employees in Tennessee. I know they couldn't affect federal employees, but I don't know whether or not they could eliminate, because most of the government employee union members are state and local. California, just to give you an idea of why California is so far left as a state, California has 11% of the population of the United States, but 24% of the government employee union members are employed in California. So they have an outsized power base in California, and that's why in California all these terrible things that happen, public policy, people look at it and say, that is so foolish. Why do they do that? And the answer is the Democrat Party does everything the government employee unions want them to do. And then the government employee unions don't care what else the Democrats do.
As long as they get their money.
As long as they get what they want, which is higher pay, greater oversight of their own, and tremendous benefits. The unfunded liabilities in California are huge.
These are pensions.
Pensions and
health
care pensions.
For retirees.
Yes, yeah. And so, Mike, when you ask the question for me, you have to look at the essence. You know, when we did our tapes, our programs on philosophy, you had Plato, who said he was always trying to figure out what is the essence of the thing. What makes it what it is? What's the primary thing? And then you had Aristotle, who talked about sequences and what's the first mover?
Causation.
Cause and effect. Cause and effect. And what Aristotle talked about was, if it's a simple problem, then the problem is B. It is caused by A. If you solve A, you fix B. Then he said a complex problem is D is the problem, which is caused by C, which is caused by B, which is caused by A. If you're trying to solve for D by solving C, you won't succeed because C isn't the primary mover. You have to go all the way back to the primary mover. When JFK became president, the total federal budget was $100 billion. We are now $7 trillion and exploding.
In a way, this discussion is platonic because we're talking about what is the essence of the problem. Mm-hmm. And you've said pretty forcefully that the government unions are the essence of the problem. This puts into new light what's going on in the shutdown, because part of the threat that Trump is making is that if you don't open the government, we're going to not just furlough people, we're going to lay them off.
Yeah.
And layoffs in the government
get to come back.
Is a direct hit on the membership of the government unions.
Yes. Yeah. And what that would go to court, and the lower courts would certainly side with the government employee unions. And I don't know where the Supreme Court would side on whether or not, if the money has been appropriated, whether or not Trump has the authority. I don't know the answer. I'm not saying it would happen one way or the other because I just don't know how the law reads on that. What I do know is that we are on an unsustainable course, having just completed the year with a $1.8 trillion deficit, which was equal to last year's $1.8 trillion. I read an article where the non-performing student loans are $1.6 trillion. Non-performing are $1.6 trillion, meaning that they're not being paid back. And, you go back and
that's not counted in the deficit. That's off the books, right?
It's counted in the debt, but not the deficit.
Yes.
You're correct. It's counted in debt because you have to borrow the money.
Yeah.
Federal government has to borrow the money to lend it.
So
but
we had a deficit of 1.7 or 1.8 last year, but we had to borrow nearly 3.5.
Well, that 1.6 is an accumulation all the way back. Obama's the one who
Okay,
federalized.
so it didn't all happen in 1 year.
No.
Okay.
This is 10 years and counting.
Okay.
Okay, but Obama is the one who federalized student loans, and once that happened, two things happened. One is the amount of non-performing loans exploded over time, and the other was that tuitions exploded because now there wasn't any check on tuitions because the government would simply loan more money.
Yeah, pay whatever they charged.
And
which is a form of the problem we have with government unions, is they're on the same side of the table. They want more dependency. They'll loan more money. And so what check is there on that?
Right. And Obamacare explicitly said that Obamacare could not be used for illegal immigrants, to help illegal immigrants. It explicitly said that. And now some courts are saying, I don't care what it says. If an illegal immigrant shows up at the emergency room must take care of the illegal immigrant. Well, who pays for that?
Yeah.
Who pays for that? And so that's what the Democrats are now claiming, that the federal government needs to pay for that. And so this gets into, okay, well, if the federal government has to pay for it, are we just going to keep running the deficit higher and higher and higher? And are we prepared for the inflation that comes with that, the much higher interest rates, the lower standard of living for everybody? Because that would be the effect of exploding deficits. We saw that with Biden. He had exploding deficits. His federal spending under Biden went from 21% of the economy to 25% in 18 months. That is a giant increase in the rate of federal spending. And so Trump is now trying to bring it back down to 21%, and Democrats are resisting any cuts in spending. And so that's where we are.
I think historically that number's been more like 17 or 18%, hasn't it? Share of the GDP?
The taxes have been 17 to 18%. The spending has been 20 to 21%.
So you had
a 3% deficit.
Yeah.
But now the deficit under Biden, it ran up to 8%. Now it's at 6%.
Right.
And Trump is trying to get it back down to 3%.
Yeah.
And just, in a big picture, if the deficit's 3% and productivity gains are 3%, then theoretically inflation is almost flat.
Yeah.
Yeah. But
so let me ask you this.
Yeah.
If we had the same deficit this year as last, very nearly the same, around $1.8 trillion, what was the effect of DOGE? We heard a lot of publicity about all the savings they were finding, and as far as I can tell, there's no change in the deficit.
That's a great question. I'm going to try to answer it this way. One is Trump offered federal employees a 6-month severance package if they would give up their job, and so that began in March or April.
There's 300,000 or so took them up.
300,000 employees.
Yeah.
But then they got paid for the next 6 months.
Yeah. So the savings haven't started.
The savings from that have not started yet.
Yeah.
So that's number one. Number two is the DOGE cuts only amounted to $10 billion in the fiscal year. So that's what that clawback was that passed in the spring. So it's only $10 billion. Cutting off the USAID money that takes more time.
Extends into the future. And so the savings are counted over many years.
Yes.
Like we hear the budgets now, they basically total up for 10 years what something is going to cost.
Right. That's how they do it.
Yeah.
And unless it is passed in statute that such and such a tax would only last 4 years, or a tax cut would be 4 years, then you only count 4 years. It's really strange.
Yeah.
But they do that not for good economic reasons. They do it mostly for political reasons.
For window dressing and gamesmanship to present the story that they want people to hear.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's like the salary caps and all that stuff in football. There's so much flexibility in the way things are accounted for.
Yeah.
That the real costs are obscured.
Yes. So what you have now is you have the clean CR that you alluded to earlier is a CR, continuing resolution, to keep spending at the same level as it was passed last year. it would not include the so-called emergency spending that went into effect with Biden's executive order
for COVID.
For COVID, but he used it to sign all kinds of spending, including illegal immigrants, including increasing the subsidies, how much you could earn and still get subsidies. You can earn under Biden. You can earn $600,000. A couple can earn $600,000 in certain states and still qualify for Obamacare subsidies. The original Obamacare law said 400% of poverty.
Well, this happened with Social Security when it started. It was just for a very meager number of people, percentage of people, but it kept being liberalized over decades.
But at least they increased it by statute.
Yeah,
this was more than $1 trillion increase by executive order based on an emergency.
Yeah, different ways to do it. I'm making a different point, which is that years ago there's a book called Leviathan that basically said the government tends to spike and not go back.
Right.
Okay, and it's particularly in war times. You saw it with Social Security. You see it with Medicare and with Medicaid. You start these programs, they get small, they start small, and they get big, and there's resistance to clawing them back. Mm-hmm. This happened in Nashville when we had property taxes go up right during COVID. And part of the rationale for it was all these expenses of COVID, which are real expenses. Great, we need to pay for those. Let's increase the rate for that. When does it go back? Was my question. The answer is never.
Never. That's right. Rahm Emanuel once said, "Never let a crisis go to waste." And so that's
for people that want bigger and bigger government, what that means is constantly pushing to ratchet the government larger.
Right, and then using so-called emergency situations to do something temporary that then they fight to make permanent.
Yes,
and that's where we are now. So the fiscal year.
It's exactly what's going on in the shutdown.
Yes, yeah, that is what the battle is, and what the Republicans have done in passing the clean CR is to reduce spending back to what was passed by statute a year ago, but eliminating all of the emergency spending that Biden signed into executive orders during COVID, claiming it was a COVID emergency. Well, COVID's over now.
Yeah. Let me tell you a story that's really very related to this, and I find very interesting. Years ago, I went to a seminar, a conference, and we were talking about what they call the life cycle. You know, we know it as a bell curve. You can also call it the thermodynamic cycle. It describes life. You know, things born, they grow rapidly, they plateau, then they start to they get adolescent, and then they decline and then die. Okay, so the question is, does this cycle apply to non-biological systems like governments and other organizations? Do you get mature organizations that need to be reformed? Does that mean you push them back from this left shoulder of the bell curve back to health when things were thriving and growing? And one point of view at this conference was this is really impossible to do. There's too many structural obstacles for making an over-the-hill organization go back to health. The better thing to do is push it off the cliff, kill it, replace it with a new one. That's what nature does with life.
Well,
okay, so the question is, and to me, it's such a vivid example and story. We're clearly trying to push things back from where they have gone over a life cycle. Mm-hmm. How feasible is it to do?
Well, there are some things that are, I think, politically impossible to push back over the cliff. I mean, the way you're describing it. I don't believe
you mean push back to health or to push forward over the cliff?
Well, I think Social Security, to me, is an example of a program that has such broad-based support that if you tried to reform Social Security in particular, you would have a very, very difficult time winning the next election. And the people who beat you would not only be for not reducing Social Security, but would also be for increasing a lot of other government spending. So it is foolish to argue, in my opinion, politically, if you're trying to control the size of government, picking the most popular program and saying we need to cut that is foolish. Now, Medicare, this is a great question, Mike. If I could.
That's why I'm here.
Yes, that is why you are here. If I could.
That's what I live for.
So listen carefully. If I could come up with a way to reduce the cost of a doctor visit, reduce the cost of the doctor visit, and thereby reduce the amount that Medicare paid the doctor, and the doctor still nets the same amount, but I can reduce the costs, and therefore I give the doctor, instead of Medicare gives the doctor $80 instead of $120. I've saved the taxpayers $40. Have I cut Medicare benefits?
I'm thinking ahead, actually, and not listening to the numbers in your example, so I don't have an answer.
Shall I say it again?
Say it again. Yes.
Okay. I'm in the government.
Yes.
And I figure out a way to reduce the costs that a doctor incurs by participating in Medicare.
Okay.
Okay. And I reduce that cost that the doctor incurs by $40 for a doctor visit.
Yes.
And I used to give the doctor, Medicare used to give the doctor $120. But now, since I've helped the doctor save $40, I now only give the doctor $80. Have I cut Medicare benefits?
No, the patients are getting the same benefit. It's just costing less.
But the people who are for bigger government would claim that $40 cut
benefits.
Is cutting benefits.
Yes.
Which shows you how difficult it is to actually have a savings.
Yeah, and so this is where I was going when I said I was thinking ahead. It is possible to creatively destroy old ways of doing things and replace them with a better way of doing things.
Yes, and we do that in the private sector all the time.
Technology, then, is the answer. How do we use technology to reduce costs, to replace ways of doing things? Mm-hmm. You have to be willing to reform to get that replacement. You know, this is where conservatism, literally understood, means conserving the old way of doing things. You have to change the old way.
Yeah. Here's another example, using exactly what you're talking about. Elon Musk has stated that he will allow the federal government to use his AI to identify fraud in Medicare and Medicaid. So if the expenditures in Medicare and Medicaid are reduced because AI was finding fraud, would that be cutting benefits?
No.
But what happens when the Democrats claim it is?
By the way they measure it,
By
that's
the way
cutting
they
benefits.
measure it, which is only gross spending.
Yeah.
That's all they care about.
Well, another way of looking at that is that you're measuring by inputs rather than outputs.
Yeah.
And we have to look at outputs.
Yeah.
You know, one thing that occurs to me is that AI can probably do a lot of customer service and even, you know, minor medical coaching and training, you know, wellness and things like that. That can be automated and be low touch.
Yes.
People are expensive, but you do a system like that. That's a good example where technology can cut out a lot of expense in the healthcare system.
Yeah, but we're saying the same thing here. And what I'm saying is that the way the Democrat Party, and let me say this, I'm being partisan here.
Yeah.
Because for the first time in my life, I'm going to back up a second and amend that just a bit. During the first 2 years of Reagan's presidency, he made tremendous efforts to cut government waste, and he succeeded in cutting some government waste, and that was over the objection of many Democrats, but not all Democrats in Congress, because he did get legislation passed. But it only lasted for 2 years, and then it turned around and started back up again.
The growth in government.
The growth
spending.
in government. Bush the first didn't do a thing. Clinton, the only thing he did was he did, under political pressure, agree to health welfare reform.
Right.
Okay, but he tried to pass Hillary Care, which would have been Obamacare on steroids. So what he tried to do and failed would have been terrible. What he did do under political pressure was good for a relatively short period of time, meaning those reforms were in place for 6 or 7 years, and then they reverted back to the status quo. And then after Clinton, you had George W. Bush. His presidency was essentially was to fight the war on terror. He didn't pay much attention to domestic politics at all. Karl Rove was extremely cautious on cutting anything that might, what he thought would be, make it difficult for Republicans to win elections, and in so doing, Republicans lost elections because of the economic mess that bad policies created in 2008, 9, and 10. Mm-hmm. Then Obama gets in and explodes government with Obamacare and explodes it with student loan, federalizing of student loans. Trump gets in.
Let me just interrupt you for a second to say, as you mentioned the problems of 2008, 9, and 10, hopefully a lot of our audience is young. Our intention here is from our generation to talk to younger people about things they're not being taught. 2008 was a horrible time.
2008, 9, and 10.
Yeah,
terrible.
It started in 8, and it did continue for a couple of years. But I remember, Wall Street entities were failing.
Oh, yeah.
Some of my business school friends worked for those entities, and I remember thinking, what's going to happen to them? But more importantly, these institutions, like big investment banks, just went out of business. GE almost went out of business.
Lehman Brothers.
Yeah, it did.
Poof.
Yeah.
Bear Stearns. Poof.
Disappeared.
Yeah.
And so it was very unstable and scary.
Yes.
Like the breakdown of
AIG.
of our financial
AIG,
system.
the biggest insurance company, I think, in the world,
was
down to like 3 days of cash. I mean, it was a scary time.
Right.
And that's when and banks across the board were in trouble, and they passed legislation. I don't remember what it was called, but you received these loans that you had to pay back. And by the way, the banks did pay them all back plus interest. Yeah. But it was a very scary time because of the policies that led to it.
Right. They built up over a long time, and that was the crisis. We keep talking about unsustainable here.
Yes.
That's the kind of event that we're pointing to that's going to happen again if we don't get some of these growing cancers arrested.
Yes. And so at any rate, so then Trump gets elected the first time, and he spent 4 years. Yes, he spent 4 years essentially battling the bureaucracy and fighting to keep his presidency. He accomplished some things, but he didn't accomplish. He passed some legislation. The 2017 Tax Act was a good piece of legislation that helped the economy grow. And in fact, the economy was growing very nicely until COVID hit.
And all those prosecutions and Russiagate and all that stuff really were pretty effective at keeping him on his heels.
Yes. Oh, yeah. And they were all fake. I mean, we now know those were all of those things with the Russia hoax and all that stuff that was fake. And it was just literally contrived. So at any rate, then Biden gets in and explodes the government again because that's just he could.
Well, they had COVID as a
cover.
Excuse.
As a cover. And now Trump is in again. And this is the first time, this is the point I was trying to make here. This is the first time in my lifetime where there's a president who actually is putting in place a sustained effort to really cut government spending. And the resistance is enormous because the other side is the party of bigger government. And so what you have is, what's that immovable object hits the force or whatever it is?
The irresistible force.
Meets the immovable object.
Right.
And so you're now right here at loggerheads. And what's in the balance is the future prosperity for the country, which is a big deal. But you do not tax your way into prosperity, and you do not increase your prosperity by going further and further into debt at an accelerating rate.
Yes.
And that's the key thing, at an accelerating rate. If Trump can get control and have the deficit shrink 2 or 3
relative to the size of the economy, which means growing the economy. That's the only solution, is to grow the
and hold government spending in check.
Yes.
In other words, you don't have to slash. This is the point. You don't have to slash government spending, but there are ways, and we've had podcasts on this. People can go look up the podcast on healthcare. Healthcare, there's $2 trillion of potential savings in healthcare. Now, the people who would fight that like a tiger would be primarily the insurance companies, secondarily big pharma, because all of their pricing is set by people other than the market. It's set by bureaucrats, and paid by bureaucrats, and then people are just stuck with the higher premiums, and they can do nothing about it because of the way the statutes are written. So there is tremendous, and that's why I asked the question: if I can come up with a way to reduce the cost of providing health care by 30%. And then government then pays out 30% less. Have I reduced benefits? And your answer was no, you haven't reduced benefits. You've just made it more cost effective, which would be accurate, but it isn't the way it would be portrayed. And so that's where the battle is now. And healthcare is just one of them. Student loans and education is another. We just came out with test scores, showed that nationally our test scores are the lowest they've been in since they've been recording the test scores. But yet we continue to increase spending. Well, there's something wrong if you increase spending and get worse results. And that's because the government runs the schools. There's not that creative, what do you call it, the creative destruction.
Yes.
That you see in the private sector. And there are schools now in Texas. There was a company in Texas that started using AI to teach kids, especially lower-income kids. And these lower-income kids are now moving at their own pace. And they are finding that if you have a teacher who acts as a coach and AI is doing the teaching, that these kids are performing at a remarkable, they're increasing their abilities at a remarkable pace. And so that's a wonderful thing, but that would be enormously disruptive to the status quo and to the teachers' unions. And so they will fight that like a tiger because it hurts their union. They don't care about the students. They care about their unions. So anyway, Mike, is there anything else that I just kind of wanted to talk about these differences that are going on today, and the article you sent me with Andrew Sullivan was so interesting.
Well, I think we've hit on an interesting, which is to beware of all these claims about cutting benefits because they are measuring inputs. And the goal is to input less and get more out.
Yes.
To be more efficient. So
yes.
We should be cutting the amount spent. That is not the same as cutting the result.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
And the other thing I would say is we do have a kind of a once in a history opportunity to grow out of this because of AI. At the end of World War II, we had enormous debt. And as I understand it, we kind of just held that sort of steady and grew through the 60s and 70s, which because our competitors had been blasted, literally. England, Germany, Japan, their industrial bases had been obliterated. It took them a long time to catch up. So we made a lot of hay in terms of our fiscal health in the United States during that time. We can do that again now with the effects of AI and the productivity that can come from that if we just put a lid on our spending.
Yeah, and that'll create a lot of disruption, but it also offers the promise of reducing the amount of debt as a share of a deficit as a share of the economy, and that is essentially that's the only way to get out of this. And
I think it's very hopeful if we have the right leadership.
Yeah, and that last part is the key. Yeah. So, Mike, I appreciate your time today.
Well, let's go for it again next week.
Yeah, you bet. Thanks.
Okay.